I've been looking at art for many, many years. I still love looking at art, and I think that's important for artists to always be aware of what other people are doing, not so much to compare yourself, but just to open your mind to different techniques and ideas. I remember doing art all the time as a kid. I think it's always been part of my life. But as far as learning from teachers and wanting to formalize my learning, I think I was in my late 20s. But I have a degree in art history, so that was kind of simultaneous with that. I got a degree in art history, and I think I was shy about being in a studio with people, so went the art history way, and then eventually started doing art. And I began by doing watercolor. I went to UMass, and that's where I got my degree in art history with a focus on Islamic art. And then I studied with local teachers, and I'm self-taught as well. One person, I can't remember her name at the moment, but she was teaching watercolor and color theory, and that was wonderful. Got a lot of ideas from her on how to approach things, and I think when you begin to do art, you begin to see things differently. Everything looks different. And then I did figure drawing classes at the Guild Art Center and did watercolor with Bob Potter up in Plainfield. I would go to his studio, and he gave me one-on-one lessons. That was so long ago. And in between times, I've always tried to find time for art, even though I didn't have a studio until 2.5 years ago. I'm a body worker. I do energy work and body work, craniosacral therapy, Reiki, and acupressure. So that was my way of making a living, and I love it. I still do that part-time. Art was always there, calling me. And during COVID, of course, I couldn't do body work during quarantine times. So I turned my bodywork studio into an art studio for a while. I wasn't working on people for about a year. And that's when I really started focusing on collage and acrylic and learning online from different teachers at that point. And that's when I started having time, more time. My son was grown and gone and had more time for this art thing. That was my passion. So, yeah, I guess it was COVID quarantine that brought it really back. I think it has to do with age. It has to do with kids being grown and on their own. And I think at a certain age, maybe for me it was 65 or so, and I saw, and also being a body worker, I see people's health concerns, I see people's lives ending sometimes. And I also used to work with hospice as a volunteer, so I've always been aware of the limits of time, and I think as I got older, I could see that it was, let's go, let's do it or don't do it. Make a commitment and go for it. So that was it. I think it had to do with age, maturity, and having the opportunity. This studio wasn't rented at that time. I was using a room nearby where I did body work. So I did a perimeter studio. I set up art tables all around the perimeter of my bodywork studio. The center was empty, and so I worked. I worked on those tables, brought in my materials, started collecting more and more materials. And my routine during quarantine was to come over to the studio and do yoga and do art. I wanted the space free in the middle to do yoga. So I guess you could say body energy has always been part of what I do. And I think it's true for most artists is that there's nothing that isn't art. So it's all related. Anything that you do creatively or in your life, it's all cross-pollinating all the time. I think you know, even though COVID was tragic for so many, there was also this silver lining for me where all of that focus I could give was something I could give to my art. The creative part is the risk part. It's the part where manifesting ideas into the physical form and really trusting your intuition and trusting. I find that what works is going with things that really are exciting and interesting to me. And if they're not, it's just not going to work. What I tend to do is I'll learn from somebody by either watching a video or going to a class or something, and then I'll take the things that I've learned and go back to the studio or the kitchen table and explore those, try things out in my way. Because I believe everyone can do art. You know, it's a matter of practicing and taking the time. So it's really honing in on what I think the teacher was trying to say and what they were showing me, and then finding my own way of doing that. Well, I think it's time mostly. I'm not someone with lots of resources. I decided to invest in myself. You know, like I said, I sold a few paintings, which offsets my expenses. Art supplies are expensive. And, you know, renting a space and all that. I just decided to invest in myself, and I decided I was able to do that resource-wise. And also, I could find the time. So, and I've always wanted to do it, and I thought, well, this is it. This is your chance. There are some threads that I'm very aware of, and I think things became clearer to me when I moved 5 years ago. I had to put everything together and look at everything that I'd done. I'm an energy worker, so there's a lot of energy in my work. There's an expression to me of connection between objects and their surroundings. There's sort of a permeability. And I'm really interested in interface, which is related to bodywork too, sort of having surfaces meet and the way they react to each other. And what else? I have a favorite palette, I guess, favorite colors. I studied Islamic art history. My advisor was Walter Denny at UMass, who's a tremendous professor. I think the influence of that is here very much. I have a deep love of turquoise and aqua, and you'll see a lot of turquoise in my work. The beauty of details. You know, my details are really abstracted. They're really not formal. They're formalized in ways of thinking about composition and contrast and colors and things like that, but they're more intuitive than Islamic art typically is. When you look at miniatures, they're very meticulously detailed, but my love of detail, I think, is from that, I would say, related to that. I live near the river in Conway, and I think nature inspires me quite a bit. And my work with people over the years has inspired me. I've always been an observer of people and nature and all kinds of things. I am an observer, so that gets expressed for sure. It's a way of expressing, and you know, I always feel better when I'm working, when I'm producing artwork. If I'm not in the studio, I don't feel quite right. And I have sold a number of paintings over the years, and since I've had this studio in Conway, I have sold some paintings, and I'm happy about that. At this age, most of my focus is I want to take the opportunity to explore my work and expand my knowledge of what I'm doing and do some experimentation. I do build, yeah. Usually, by the time I'm done with a series, I'll do a series of 3 to 9, say usually, sometimes 2. But when that series is completed for me, I'm ready to have it done with and move on. I'm ready to go because I already have ideas that series has given me. You know, they grow from each other. And I think that's the beauty of working in a series, is that if you're working on one piece and you go, oh, I don't know what to do next, you go to the next one. Don't get stuck, keep moving. And one section will inform the next, and they inform each other. Still life and landscape. And it was, I guess you would call it more impressionistic in style. Watercolor, I love watercolor, the glow of it, the light of it, it's pretty unforgiving. And it was a discipline, you know, learning that. And I love the colors and what you can do. And I loved combining graphite with watercolor in particular. So I'm getting back to still lifes now. I like working abstractly. And I'm combining abstract approaches with still life. And because I think I've taken a ceramics class from someone in Cummington, and I've been inspired to, you know, start drawing containers and bowls and things and incorporating them. So I'm bringing real shape into play with abstract. When I work, what I try to do with a painting is, say someone walks into a room and they see your painting across the room and they go, oh, that's kind of interesting, and they see the general look of it. It's kind of, and it draws them closer, and then when they get closer, they see lots of details, which they didn't notice coming in the door, but the general look of it, or the contrast, or whatever, the colors, draws them. And as people get closer, they begin to see more and more going on, you know. So I like it when they're fun to look at. I want people to have fun looking at my work, to enjoy the layers. There's many, many layers in this work, and enjoy the details. And it's kind of a metaphor for life, I guess. Over the past few years, since I've been doing more art, I'm developing a process that I can trust, which helps me relax into creating. I think when you don't have some sort of routine that brings you your inspiration, it can be kind of nerve-wracking. You're kind of floating around and grasping for ideas, or what do I use for materials, or this and that. So I do have a process, and I love painting on wood panels. Canvas is good too, but I love wood panels because of the texture, you know, they don't bounce. So what I do is I start by writing. I'm also a writer. I've done creative writing for years, and that's part of my work here. I've written memoir. I'm part of a memoir writing group for about 10 years now. So I'll have just a phrase come to me, and you know, you prepare the panel with gesso, and I'll write that phrase out in graphite. I'll just start writing. Or if I have a specific inspiration, like with my stone stories, piles of stones, that's how I doodle. I just draw piles of stones, and I thought, why not try this doodle for some paintings? So I started with drawing piles of stones. And I know that these images are going to be covered eventually. They may or may not come through the final work. But that's the underpinning of that. That's the inspiration for that series. I like to work in series of 2 or more. So I start by drawing, and then I'll put areas of color. I want the surface to be interesting to look at. And so these areas of color may or may not exist when the painting's done. But it's just, I go with colors that call to me and that are appealing, and I put them together, and I'm thinking warm and cool. I'm thinking, I'm not thinking about the final product so much as just creating an interesting surface. And I'll stick on pieces of collage, or maybe old newspaper. I have vintage books I use, old music, you know, and I'm looking for that surface that is just fun to look at. And then as I do more layers, I start to see with these can I hold one of these up?
Yes.
This is something in progress now. It's a still life study, and it's really starting to emerge. What happens, you can see the layers I started with, and what I start to see is these shapes kind of coming out of the papers and paint areas. You know, I just start to see places to put these vessels. And so I'll do a little outline of them. And then eventually what I want, I don't know if you can, in those, I guess, you can see what happened, but I know that I need more contrast. Here I'm experimenting with a palette I don't usually use. This is very pale. This is very light, like off tone, like off colors. So I wanted to experiment with that. That's something new. And as I go along, I'll take, these are hand-painted collage pieces of paper that I'll rip up and just add for texture and highlight on these still lifes. And then eventually there will be more contrast. And what I want to do with this is bring the vessels forward. And there's some little ones over here too. And then I want to bring back the background. I want the background to be more subtle and let these come forward. So there'll be more contrast with the vessels. So that's my process right now. And I like that. I like starting with marks. I think, you know, a white sheet of paper or a white panel is intimidating. And I think it just helps to make some kind of mark that you can respond to and trust your intuition. And then as time goes on, you begin to make decisions about, you know, this is coming towards the finish, you know, not probably another few layers, but I begin to see what the composition is going to be and what my goal might be with the work. It's a progression, and it also, I mean, I see things coming back to me as well that I want to look at more. You know, I did a lot of, at one point I was doing a lot of sketches of stones. I love stones. And so I was doing almost still lifes of stones, very abstracted. I'm interested in doing more of that. The stone stories that I'm showing at GCTV are part of that. And I don't want to leave it, but I want to see what else I can do with it. So it's sort of an evolution of an old idea. I want to do more of that. And also still life is something I've always loved. And I'm looking at ways now of doing it in a different way with collage and abstraction. I have so many materials that I could be doing artwork for 24 hours a day for 10 years. Some materials are found materials. I experiment with vintage books, music, like I said, photographs, and sometimes I use magazines or writings that I've done. I have stories that I've typed out, and sometimes I'll rip them up and use them in collage. I use acrylics as far as paint, sometimes inks, acrylic inks. I love walnut ink also, and graphite, hand-painted collage papers, and I print collage papers as well on jelly print using jelly squares, you know, jelly print. I can't remember the word. Anyway, I do gel prints, monoprints. Mm-hmm. And what else do I use? Primarily, like I said, I work on wood panels and sometimes watercolor paper. Yeah, or canvas. I'm thinking of going larger. The 20 by 20 inch ones are large for me. Right now it's by choice. I'm comfortable with the smaller work. I don't feel constricted by it. It's kind of like a short story. You know, you can get a lot, you can say a lot in a small place. I think it's more convenient. And I might experiment with larger pieces eventually, but right now it's a choice.
Your choice of acrylics over oil, why is that?
Don't like the smells of oil supplies. I have done oil painting in the past. I have some oils that I've done. It's complicated. I don't like how long it takes to dry. I have used alkyds before, but I just don't like the odors associated with oil painting. I do love the quality of the colors, but with acrylics these days, I think you can get some beautiful colors, and with the different mediums you can use, you can get quite a wide variety of color and texture. So I'm happy with the acrylic. They're easy. I did pastels for a long time also. Did a lot of still lifes with pastel because they're convenient. And I used soft pastel, did some portraits with those, and still life. And I have worked with oil pastels. Sometimes I incorporate crayons and oil pastels in my work, in my collages too. But the oil pastels I used to mix with turpentine so I could paint with them. But still, you've got the fumes, so I don't do that anymore. It's mostly the physicality of oils, you know. They take so long to dry too. Yeah, I guess you could say that. I have the hairdryer out to expedite the drying times, because I have ideas that are happening, and I want to be able to respond to those. Well, there are so many things that can pull you away from art. You need to make a living. Most people don't make a living doing art. That's true. But I would say find a way to express yourself in whatever form you enjoy most, or whatever form is presented to you or that you can create within your life as it is. You know, just stay creative. So that it could be watercolor, it could be painting, it could be sculpture, it could be so many things, fabric arts, writing. I think artists need to create, and whatever is possible, do it. And believe in yourself. And have a good talk with the inner critic. And just say, you know, unless you're going to be helpful today, just zip it, stand aside. I'm going to be doing some work now. And trust yourself. I am disciplined. I don't really believe in, what do they call it? Writer's block kind of idea. I don't really believe in those. I think the inspiration comes when you're working. There are plenty of days I come in here and I don't feel like it. But I'm coming in and I'm doing it because this is what I do. This is who I am. So my life is varied. Every day is a little different because I still do body work part-time at home in my office and still have other obligations. But I come in regularly to the studio and I write it in my book. I write it in my schedule book, studio, and you're there for 2 or 3 hours, you know. But also, the other thing is that I think is important to say, and I would say this to younger artists too, you can get a lot done in a half hour. If you have a half an hour to do art, do it. Don't think you're not going to do anything, because something can happen and it can make a difference in your day. You know, you can really get somewhere in a half hour. If you have 3 or 4 hours, that's great. Not everybody does. You don't even need 8 hours. You know, people think you just need all this time. I think just keep going in any way you can. And that's the kind of artist I am. It's about, I think Matisse said something about it. Henry Matisse said something about the inspiration is in doing the work. That's a paraphrase, but if you're waiting around for an inspiration to hit you in the head, it's just, you're not going to get anything done. So it comes as you're working. Some days easier than others, I think. And just the way of seeing, you know, the way artists see the world, see life. It's not just when you're in your studio. You know, it's just always there.
Oh, that's what it was. How did things change when you were able to come out of the COVID quarantine and start doing work?
I had to find a balance. I actually really missed the quarantine, frankly. I like having a lot of alone time, which is good because that's most art is created by people who are alone a lot. it can be a lonely thing, but I never really felt lonely. I missed having the alone time, and I was pretty determined to create at least pockets of that as I went about my day, as people became more social and, my bodywork practice started up again. So I'm always trying to find that balance. I did a solo show last year at the Hosmer Gallery in Northampton at the Forbes Library. Actually, it wasn't solo. I was with two other artists. They called it a solo show, but I was with two others. I did a solo show at the Meekins Library in Williamsburg and at the Conway Field Memorial Library. So it's not my first solo show. Looking forward to it. I like sharing my work. I think it'll appeal to some and not others, but if it's something that people can enjoy, I think art and beauty are necessary for people, and these days, the more of that, the better. If people have a positive response, it helps me feel good about what I'm doing. It makes it's kind of satisfying when people respond and understand it somewhat. It's nice to be understood. Some work's sold, which always is nice to, and also I know where some of the pieces are, which is fun to know whose home they're in or wherever. Response was mostly positive, yeah. Some people had never seen my work and they were surprised. They didn't know, that I did all this stuff. And what else do I gain? Connections with people, and possibly an opportunity to share with other artists. I think it's made me more comfortable with myself, to be comfortable with my work. Like I talked about the process I like, I can rely on it. And it's still an adventure. There's still these edges that you go, you remind yourself it's just paint and paper, or it's just, color. Don't get so wrapped up in it, but you do. And it is, I think for me, it's just so rewarding, to be able to not rely on words and express in a way that is bigger, really, with images for me. And I think it's given me confidence. I second guess myself less because I see my work evolving and I see that I can make choices that I'm happy with, which, I think is true in life too. But the art can help people just be more and more at home with themselves. I do these for me. I'm not doing them to please anybody. I'm hoping people like them and buy them, but this is something, the way I express in my work is for me. It's personal. So when something's done, I can sit back and look at the piece and say, yep, and I get this feeling. It's really a body feeling. It's visceral, and you go, yep, that's done. And to someone else it might not be, but to me it is. And I think it really honestly is when it doesn't need help anymore. It doesn't need anything. I'm just glad that I decided to spend more time doing it. I'm very glad that I made that decision to go for it and spend as much time as possible at the studio. The more time I spend at the studio, the happier I am, and then I can produce art that hopefully people will enjoy.